Hey up, lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more ranking updates. We have got the fighters here. I just want to quickly say that this is more like a preliminary version of this, because obviously the patch only hit yesterday and I'm doing this today. I left my fleets with a handful of pretty much all of these fighters and hangars on blockades overnight, and went through all the data this morning. So the patch is interesting. It's going to change the meta very, very slightly from preliminary looks at it, and for only one reason, and it's the ships that can hit props. So the ships that can hit the propulsion, they are considerably better than pretty much everything else. The weapon ones are obviously quite good, the ones that take out weapons. Hangars, so-so, and the command center ones are absolutely, not worth your time in my opinion. So, with that being said, we'll jump into this, and I'll talk a bit about the patch and how this has affected some of these ships as we go through them. But yeah, so let's jump into it then. So we're going to start off with the Mistral. The Mistral did get some slight changes. It really doesn't matter. The changes that were made to the Mistral doesn't really help it in any way, shape or form. It's an anti-air ship. It's the same as the Spore and the Sandrake. I believe the Spore did get some changes. Again, you're not really running them for that system damage in the first place. You're running them to screen the enemy air and hopefully kill it all off before it kills you off. With that being said, the Mistral is S tier. It's absolutely amazing. If you get them like maxed out, these things just remove any aircraft in the sky with like no issues whatsoever. It's competition mainly being the Spore and the Sandrake, and they just don't keep up with it. The Spore can, but the Mistral has the added benefit of being able to attack from separate fleets, where the Spore can't. So the Mistral, in my opinion, is the best anti-air fighter in the game. Highly recommend you run it. If you got it, just dump your points until you can max it with 30 XP, or just max it straight off the bat if you want to do that. It is, yeah, it's just absolutely solid. The Spore is going to go A tier. Yes, it can keep up with the Mistral, but only if it's in the fleet that's being attacking the other fleet. If it's in a flank fleet, it can't hit air, and that's why it's going to drop down to A, because it loses a little bit of its power from, being a fantastic AA ship if it can't shoot air because it's in your flank fleet. And you can't always guarantee your fleet that has the Spore being the main fleet being attacked. So I'm going to put it in A rank, but it is still very, very, very strong. The Sandrake is going to go up there with it. I think it's a very good ship. It's not quite as damaging as the Spore or Mistral. It does do slightly better than the Spore because of in the situation that in the flank fleet it will still attack air. But at the same time, it's not quite as much damage output as the Spore Mistral does. So I'm going to put it in just below the Spore. They're almost on par though, in my opinion. We then have the Damphyre. Now, the Damphyre got a patch, and it got hit with, the ability to target command, I think then weapons, and then props or something like that. It doesn't work. Now, this might be a complete oversight on the devs' part. Because the command systems rebuild or repair themselves, and they can keep repairing themselves until the point where they're, unkillable. The Damphyre keeps targeting command systems just over and over and over again. Now, targeting command systems isn't necessarily a bad thing. It knocks out the strategies of the enemy ship. However, most ships don't actually rely on their strategy to absolutely annihilate your fleets. There is a couple where Callisto is a good example. It gets a massive flat bonus as long as there's cruisers it's shooting at, and that's fantastic. But it doesn't really stop the Callisto dealing incredible amounts of damage at all. So taking out its command system really doesn't affect it all that much. So these ships that hit the command systems first have got into a position where they literally struggle to be able to do anything of real value throughout the fight, because you're either going to win within 5 minutes. Yeah, you can get some 7-minute fights, and yes, I've seen 20-minute fights with Carillion specials and all sorts trying to shoot each other for hours on end. But in a decent fleet, you're looking at maybe a 2 to maybe 7-8 minute fight against, you know, a fleet of equal capability. In that time, the ships that the Damphyre is knocking the strategies out on, the strategies probably aren't going to fire because they're either going to die before the command system's dead, or after it's dead, it's going to repair and it's going to trigger the command anyway. And yeah, it's just an absolute hodgepodge of a failed attempt to make the Damphyre do something after its horrendous nerf. It's okay damage, and yeah, to be honest, it's going to be the first on the D tier. I've previously rated Damphyre on S tier. It's now gone all the way down to D tier. It's been hit with the nerf bat far too often, far too hard, and this possible buff I think the devs may have thought it as it's worthless to it. Literally worthless to it. It's a bit unfortunate, really. The Strix. I've been running Strix recently after not running them for at least a good server because they got hit with a nerf. And I was still running them after the nerf, and I noticed that the damage was terrible on them, so I stopped running them. And I started running them again this server, and they are absolutely demolishing through ships. And if you don't take the strategy on them, they have the potential to absolutely demolish aircraft. It's crazy. I've had them out-damaging spores quite easily in anti-air capability. It's not guaranteed though. But if it's not shooting aircraft, it's shooting frigates, destroyers and stuff like that, and it does a hell of a good job at it, and it really does just chunk. So I'm actually going to put the spores at the top of A tier. The Strix at the top of A tier. They're doing fantastically large amounts of damage. They're incredibly useful now, and yeah, just really, really good. So definitely check them out if you've got them. They've gone from maybe like a B tier. They've definitely gone up to the A tier. I wouldn't say they're quite S tier because you can't guarantee them doing anti-aircraft damage. And they do seem to only target corvettes. That's another thing. I've noticed they don't really target enemy fighters too often. It's more if they are going to do AA damage, they're knocking out cellular defenders and stuff like that. And they hurt when they do it. So it's definitely going to be my... definitely going to be an A tier for me. So, we then have the Balancer Anderson. This, don't believe, got changed at all, and jamming is still absolutely and utterly useless. So yeah, it's going in D tier. Behind the Damphyre, I think it's genuinely that bad. So jamming really doesn't do much. I've seen people attempting to use jamming. It's just too RNG based. The Balancers will jam and they'll reduce the dodge rate of an enemy ship, not the hit chance or hit rate of the enemy ship, the dodge rate of the enemy ship, which doesn't make sense because it's called a jamming weapon. If it's jamming, it should be jamming the enemy, systems, therefore hit rates and stuff like that, strategies. If you could jam strategies, that would be really cool and really, really useful. Devs, if you watch this, make jamming ships jam strategies. That would be cool. I'd run them then. But yeah, because they reduce the dodge rate, and if they say they're trying to reduce dodge rate on IOs or You know, anything that has dodge rate, Eris, it just doesn't do enough. And then you have to kind of hope that the one that's being dodge rate jammed is getting shot by your ships. If they have 10 ships and your balancers are only, you know, jamming 2 of the ships, which quite often happens. They do seem to target all one ship. Your ships might not even be firing at it. You've got a 1 or 2 in 10 chance of shooting the ship that's being jammed. So unfortunately, it's rather ineffective, and should definitely have the devs should definitely have a look and, you know, maybe rework the jamming system. Jam strategies, that'd be really cool. Or hit rate. Hit rate would be good. Reduce the damage output of the enemy fleet onto yours by reducing their hit rates. Also makes good sense, and it would see use then. Bullfrog. It's going to go B tier, and that's mostly because of its siege damage. Yes, it got changed, and it can attack hangars and propulsion. And propulsion's actually really good. But the Bullfrog's damage just lets it down so much that most of the time I found that I was killing fleets before most system damage was actually dealt or knocked out. Now, propulsion I mentioned a little bit earlier in the intro. And the reason it's good is because it stops the retreat function. So you know when you blow up a ship and it just retreats back to base and then it retrofits and repairs? The Bullfrog can stop that, including on miners. You can blow up miners, finally, by knocking out their propulsion first and then blowing them up. But, yeah. So the Bullfrog's damage is just too low for it, I believe, to actually do any system damage that I've personally seen. And that's its big problem. Now, taking out hangars is quite useful. Taking out propulsion is extremely useful, because if you're taking out propulsion, you're increasing the cost to your enemy, because they're having to rebuild the ship as opposed to just sit there and wait for it to repair. Now, that's really useful. It does question, though, whether all you're going to see now is if people start losing fleets, losing fleet battles, they're just going to quickly retreat the entire fleet, which I've seen people doing already. This kind of enforces them to do it even more, which kind of makes the game boring, to be honest, if you're not actually having fleet battles. At the same time, I lost my fleet the other day. I had 3 enemies attacking me. They eventually blew it up, took them a while. I only lost 70%. I kept 70% of my ships. My fleet was defeated. Zeroed. I still had about 70 or 72%, I think I calculated it, of my ships still alive, being repaired back at base. It cost me nothing to replace my ships. Now, propulsion will reduce that chance, because if you are blowing the props on ships and they can't do that retreat function, it's going to allow you to blow up the ships entirely, which is actually really, really good. Bullfrog's not the way to do it, though. B18182 Newlands are going into A tier. Their system damage is fantastic. They are great ships in the first place. They were always pretty decent. The system damage they're doing now is really, really good as well. And they will knock out the systems they're targeting pretty damn reliably. They've got good DPM to do it with. They've got... And, you know, they're fighters, so you're getting quite a few of them. Medium size as well, which is nice. It means you can put them on your Ceres and stuff like that, or your Predators. And so it just works really, really nicely in that situation. And if you wanted a good system damage ship, this is the one I'd recommend. I actually think it's better than the Vetus A. Slightly better. SC002, it's got the exact same problems as the Balancer Anderson, it's just got even worse damage. So it's going in the bottom of D tier. The Stingray, now I run these pretty consistently. It seems to me that the damage has lowered since they got the benefits of damaging systems. Now, the systems they hit, if you give me a second, I need to double check this one again. Systems, which I can't find. It is just attack propulsion systems and then the hangar system in sequence. So, Bullfrog, hangars and propulsion. Stingrays, propulsion, and the hangars. The Stingray does it far, far better than the Bullfrog can. And again, knocking out that propulsion's really, really strong. So, I'm going to put this above the Newland. It's probably above the Sandrakes in my opinion as well, even though they do different roles in my opinion. I should probably have split this up into AA ships and then done another one with system damage ships or just your general damage ships. But either way, Stingray looks like it's lost damage, so it's not going to be killing ships quite as efficiently as it did. However, massive evasion chances on it. Leave it in a pretty nice survivable place, and it is going to absolutely nuke enemy propulsion systems within the time that you usually try and kill things. So it actually works extremely well. Still, thankfully, because when I saw the damage going from like 150k down to like, I think I was seeing like 50-60k on my battle reports, I was like, oh god, that looks really bad. And then I noticed that they are just nuking propulsion system after propulsion system, which means you're guaranteed to kill the ships. Makes it really, really strong. It's potentially even stronger than where I placed an A tier, but again, this is preliminary. I've only managed to test overnight, so, you know, maybe in a week's time I'll re-look at this list a little bit and I'll just do like a quick update video. The Vetus A, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's as good as the Newlands, but it's still a very, very good ship, and it's going to go just behind the Newland. But yeah, they're more or less similar, very similar ships in how they work and how they function, the systems that they attack and everything. So yeah, I think the Newlands will go just behind the Vetus A. Vetus B remain completely unchanged, and again, these two can be interchanged really, because one's AA, one is anti-ship. Vetus B didn't get any system damage or anything like that. It's just blowing stuff up as well as it did before. So not much really to say there. So there we go. That's how I rate them at the current moment. Again, this is preliminary. I've only had the night to run some testing and stuff on these ships. I will be doing more testing, obviously, in combat and stuff over the next week. And if anything really changes, this how it's looking. My overall thoughts of the patch is it's an interesting change. I just don't think that none of it's really doing much. You blow up hangars, for example. Okay, versus fighters, that sucks. That means they can't RTB and it makes the fighters useless. But that's until they run out of ammo and their attack runs are done and stuff like that. So they are going to get some damage output out before they need to return. In the case of it being a Corvette hangar, it's even worse because as Corvettes just don't come back to ships anywhere near as often. In the case of UAVs, it's actually pretty good because UAVs do return a hell of a lot. But at the same time, you're probably still better off just blowing up the ship, because it's still going to soak up damage from the other ships if it's getting targeted, and something that is doing damage isn't getting targeted and getting blown up. So yeah, it's kind of, and the command system one's ridiculous. Repairing the command system after it gets blown up, and it keeps repairing faster and faster to the point where it can't get targeted and blown up anymore. It just makes absolutely zero sense. If they change that so it gets blown up once and it's done, that means the enemy loses strategies. And I did mention that most of the strategies don't affect the ships in much of a way that it matters too much for most ships. Some ships do rely on it a little bit, most don't. But if it got blown up and it was a permanent thing and now they can't use strategies whatsoever, I would probably move the Damphyre up to B tier. I still don't think it's particularly great because, as I mentioned, most strategies aren't fantastic. They last, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then you're waiting a minute and a half. In a 5-minute battle, it's triggering maybe twice if you're lucky. So, you know, yeah, that's roughly where I am with this change at the moment. I'm kind of disappointed. I think some things need to change. Command systems need to be blown up permanently. I'd like to see the Bullfrog's damage brought up to at least the Stingrays, so it is doing the system damage that it needs to be doing to be viable within a fleet that isn't specifically for Siege. Stingray's doing well. It's a shame it's lost some anti-ship damage, but the propulsion damage is quite nice on it, so that's where it is. The Strix is a weird oddball at the moment. I have no idea why it's working so well whatsoever. It shouldn't be. Because I haven't seen any notes saying it got buffed, but all of a sudden it's doing pre-nerf damage. So yeah, there we go. Again, system damage on fighters, I just think it's a waste of time, because most of the time the fighter's just going to get blown up. So I don't think, Spore's hitting weapon systems and it's fighting other fighters. Fantastic. It's reducing the damage potentially going to it. But at the same time, the good chance is that after blowing up the system, the ship's taken so much damage that it's going to get blown up in a few seconds anyway. So, it's kind of here and there. So there we go. Mistral Vetus, if you've got them, put your points into them. Strix, Spore, Stingrays, Sandrakes, Newlands and Vetus A's. All fantastic ships, should be ran in your fleets if you are running Swarm. Bullfrogs, probably not in your air fleet. Put them on your KCCVs or, put them on your KCCVs and use them as little rapid attack outposts and amp hitters. Damphyres, Balancers, and SC002s. If you've got points on them, pull them off and put them on something better. So, there we go, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.